I'm sure you saw many of the memes on social media around this, but it shows you how even a single variable can have huge disruptive effects. But that also means that there are opportunities for other countries.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Babaya from the Centre for Risk Analysis. Poverty remains an enduring problem across the African continent, but recently, more African governments have been turning to trade and liberalisation in order to grow their economies. In this clip from a recent webinar, David Ansara of the Centre for Risk Analysis explains some of Africa's recent trade agreements, as well as a few of the potential stumbling blocks therein. Take a look.
Countries can transform their economies and unlock the economic potential of their populations is through liberalization of trade. As Adam Smith and David Ricardo reminded us, enable countries to take advantage of their comparative advantage, to access markets around the world, and to seek efficiencies. And the political establishment in Africa has been historically slow to recognize this benefit, given the political nature of many nationalist movements. In terms of their orientation, tend to be, by definition, nationalistic, suspicious of trade. Africa has been characterized by high regulatory burdens, high tariffs and import duties, and also high compliance costs in terms of accessing markets, so non-tariff barriers. But Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, has recognized, and these are his words, that trade and investment and not aid are pillars of development. So the political class, if you will, is talking the talk, but also to some extent walking the walk with the ratification of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And now one of the challenges with Africa is the level of intra-African trade, so trade between African countries, is very low. Only about 18% of African exports are traded within the continent. If you look at Europe, about 69% of exports of European countries are from within the Eurozone or the EU, 59% in Asia. So Africa has a long way to go to close that gap. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement will, on the upside, if it all goes according to plan, cover a market of about 1.3 billion people. And the demographic dividend is in its favor. So approximately 60% of that 1.3 billion are 25 years or younger. And this covers an overall aggregate GDP of about $3.4 trillion. So there's huge economic potential there. And the UN Economic Commission on Africa estimates that within a few years, this agreement could increase intracontinental trade upwards of about 52%. Obviously, there are a lot of conditions that need to be in place for that potential to be realized, but it is there. And according to the World Bank, approximately 30 million Africans could be lifted out of extreme poverty defined as approximately $2 per day by the World Bank. That is significant. And when we talk about growth, as we were earlier, these are not just figures that are of concern to economists or policy wonks. Economic growth translates into real and tangible improvements in people's lives. So that it should be, in terms of policy making, the emphasis, the real focal point of regulation and of government policy. So as of the end of last year, 36 of the 54 signatory nations had ratified that agreement, and the ratification by Nigeria, I think, was a big milestone.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
However, there are barriers to trade and obstacles in the way of this. So you can sign an agreement with much fanfare, but the implementation is what counts. And there is still a high degree of unclarity around rules of origin, so where goods are produced, which could challenge local manufacturers. Local pressure groups could build in opposition to the agreement. That was one of the reasons for the delay in Nigeria's ratification. And that obviously has implications for trade preferences, tariffs, and so on. So a lot of the devil's in the detail here, and we still haven't really seen that detail. So at the moment, our view as the centre is that the agreement is certainly worth celebrating, but it's not a fait accompli. There's still a lot of hard work to be done in terms of implementation. And trade agreements, as I note here, are only as good as your ability to enforce them. And trade is essentially underpinned by private property rights and the rule of law. And as we know, in many African countries, the rule of law is often abrogated by the executive. Property rights are flimsy at best. That feeds up in terms of adherence to broader international trade rules. So if there is some kind of dispute, how do you enforce that on a cross-jurisdictional way? You need to be able to enforce your rights as an investor, and until investors are given that certainty, then they might be reluctant to set up a factory or some kind of other distribution plant if they know that their goods may not be safe from the prying hands of officials. And then we've had some success across the continent with regional economic blocs. So I think most notably is probably the CFA area in West Africa in terms of its use of the CFA franc, which is pegged to the euro, but also regional economic communities, ECOWAS, the East African community. These have had some success in terms of lowering barriers to trade, but there are still obstacles there, even at the lower, more regional level. So extend that to the continent, that becomes more challenging to manage. Okay, so another point is trade is not just the free movements of goods or free access to services, it's also the movement of people. And typically this has been a sticking point to consider many of the political conflicts that have arisen in countries like South Africa around foreign nationals from other African countries coming to South Africa. That is politically very hot, and you might see politicians preferring to fall back on a kind of a nativist kind of position and abandoning their Pan-African principles. So there are a number of stumbling blocks here and a number of potential choke points. And I think what was very telling last week was to see just how there are many single points of failure in the global economy. One of which was the Suez Canal, which was blocked by the Ever Given cargo ship. I'm sure you saw many of the memes on social media around this. But it shows you how even a single variable can have huge disruptive effects. But that also means that there are opportunities for other countries. So I think this is a telling illustration of how quickly global cargo traffic was diverted around the old Cape of Good Hope as it was pre the Suez Canal. And so I showcase this to underscore the fact that African countries are incentivized to collaborate, but they should also consider competing more actively with one another. And competition, I think, will bring out the best in many African countries. That doesn't always mean that their interests are aligned. And I think it's very important to think of what is each country's national interest and how do they exert that national interest in these regional forums.
If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment, give it a like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For more access to strategic risk analysis, follow the link in the description for access to our 30-day free trial.